Welcome back to the King of the Hill. This is part 2 in the whole development cycle of this house, where I'm teaching you how to develop it from scratch, but through a little bit different eye, like maybe through a more development perspective. Kind of a little bit different than my other tutorials. And even if you don't want to develop a King of the Hill house yourself, you can still learn a ton from the series. Anyway, today we're going to be making the whole mountain climb event where people are racing through a predefined path to the top. The first person who wins gets a reward, a passive bounty event that happens every so often, and even a customizable action bar. And more is going to be done this episode. This is going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be so fun. So let's just get started. Events. Something very important in modern day housing. Without these auto events that do, like a mountain climb or bounty, which we're going to be doing. Without these, they're literally just going in the middle, doing stuff, let me upgrade. Go in the middle, doing stuff, upgrade, and let me go rebirth. But the events allow the player to take a moment, pause, and choose to do an event. Does everybody have to do the event? Heck no. Do you have to progress? For the sake of this house, you don't. You can have like event tokens, and you need event tokens to rebirth and make them required. But again, for the sake of this house, I'm not going to force players to do events. Anyways, for events, we're going to be using our loop. So let me write all this out for you. We're going to make a 6-minute countdown for the events. And then it's going to pick a random number. 1 is bounty and 2 is the mountain race. So now you're probably like, how in the world am I going to make a countdown? It's a great question. So to make the countdown, every single second we're going to have to reduce the seconds by 1. Now we could go to the main loop and literally just do it, but what we're going to do is we're going to create a new function called countdown. And we're going to do the exact same thing as we did in the main loop. Right click it and set it to 20 ticks. It's still going to be the exact same, but it's going to make it more organized. I'm going to set the icon to a clock so it can be easily done. And then we're going to change a global stat, because this is a global auto event. Timer, seconds, decrement by 1. Timer, sec, decrement 1. For the first conditional, we're going to do timer hour by timer HR, less than or equal to 0. Timer min, less than or equal to 0. Timer sec, less than or equal to 0. Then I'm going to change the global stat, timer HR, set to 0. That way once it gets to 0, literally hours is going to be 0. And then timer min, set 6 into 6 minutes. Timer sec, set to 30. Just to make it look nicer, we're just going to do 6 minutes and 30 seconds. And then it's going to trigger a function we are going to use to trigger the actual event, choose a random event, and send the broadcast, which we'll be creating later. Now the next 2 conditionals we're going to make are going to be basically when the second reaches a certain number, it's going to go seconds all the way up to 59. The next couple conditionals we're going to add is going to be like once minutes reaches a certain number, it's going to decrement hour by 1, or once seconds reaches a number, it's going to decrement minutes by 1, kind of like that. So if timer HR is greater than or equal to 1, timer min less than or equal to 0, timer seconds less than or equal to 0, timer HR decrement 1, timer min set 59, timer sec set 59. Last but not least, if timer min is greater than or equal to 1 and timer sec is less than or equal to 0, timer min subtract 1, timer sec set 59. And for the function, for the testing, we're going to just call it event broad. We're just going to send a message that says event is going to start, do/join event. Literally just a basic message to see if it works. With the hologram, I'm going to make stat.global / timer HR, timer min, timer sec. As you can see, the seconds are decrementing and the minute decremented. So if I do /edit global stats, timer min set 0. The hologram itself only updates every 2 to 3 seconds, so that's why the seconds are behind. Because exactly when I made the function, it wasn't perfectly aligned. So it may seem like sometimes it does 3 seconds, sometimes it does 2 seconds. So okay, so it's only about 10 more seconds, but I forgot to set the function to event broad, the moment of truth. And event is going to start do/join event. It works perfectly as intended after, actually setting the trigger function to event broad. So now what we're going to do in event broad, I'm going to get rid of the send chat message, and what we're going to do is we're going to change global stat. We're going to set auto event num set %random.int, which is just a random integer, which is basically a number. And we're going to put a slash. We're going to do 0, 0, and 2. We're going to do 1 and 3. Now you're probably like, why not do just 1 and 2? Well, the way it works is the last number isn't just the number it goes to. If you look in the slash placeholders, it's an exclusive bound, which is a bound it should not reach, versus an origin is like the origin place, basically where it starts. They could have just made it simpler. So now it's set to either 1 or 2. So if auto event is equal to 1, it's going to send this broadcast message. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do and 7 and M and do 1, space 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I'm going to do the same thing again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use N6 and L, but you do not want to overuse bold. Bold is something that should not be used all the time. A lot of houses that I see that are new use bold absolutely all the time, and that is not something that should happen. I believe in good looking houses. The other event is I'm going to do /join event, but this event is passive, which means literally if you're anywhere, it's going to affect you. Now, the auto event number is equal to 2. We're going to do the exact same thing, but instead of bounty brawl, it's going to be mountain climb. And I'm going to add a little pling sound when the new event is starting. So now that we have the events, we're going to add pre-event countdown. Basically, this is going to be the 30-second countdown. It's going to be literally the exact same as this countdown. And if using Housing Editor HDSL, let's say you put all this in Housing Editor HDSL, literally all you have to do is import it into this one and change the starting values and the function. This proves that Housing Editor and HDSL really do make your lives easier. As a side note, also make all of your timer sec, for example, timer sec, timer HR, make all of them slightly different. Basically, instead of timer sec for the pre-event countdown, I'm probably going to do pre-timer sec. So I added these regular things, but the only difference is, like I said earlier, change it to pre-timer HR, pre-timer sec, pre-timer min, and in the if actions, the first conditional, that basically says if each of them is less than or equal to 0, I ignored everything. I'm going to trigger a function to start an event. So for the event, I'm going to literally make a start event, and in the start event, I'm going to go ahead and add an auto event num set 0. Now I'm going to make sure this is at the very end, but this is something very important that we do not want to forget. So we're going to do if auto event num is equal to 1, and if auto event num is equal to 2, and put the set to 0 at the very end. So if auto event num is equal to 1, it's going to say in chat bounty event starting. That way we know that this is working. But if it's equal to 2, then we're going to say mountain climb starting. Now if I go to pre-event countdown, I'm going to make sure to set the function and trigger the start event. In event broadcast, what we're going to do is we're going to actually set pre-timer sec. Since you remove everything from the actual, like if it equals 0, then reset it, we're going to add a pre-timer sec set 30 to the broadcast. So what we're going to do to test timer min set 0, and let's see if it works. It should set the other one to 30 now. So if I do /test placeholder %stat.global /pre-timer sec, it's 20 now, which means it's set to 30 and it's decrementing. And voila! Bounty event is starting. I'm gonna be totally honest with you, it took me forever to figure out an event system. This is actually really like the one I'm using in Aqua Tycoon. Aqua Tycoon is a bit different, so no, you cannot copy Aqua Tycoon from this. But again, you're probably not gonna be playing Aqua Tycoon until like 2026, 2027. Probably by the time Avengers Secret Wars releases. Anyways, you've got this working now. So now we have the actual events to make. So this is gonna be fun, so let's dive right in. So you see, with this, I'm gonna go ahead and just literally just copy all that. Make a new hologram, probably like above the hill, and paste it there. That way the guests can know in a more, actually pretty way when the next event is. I put it a bit lower. Now in your house you can find a better place. I highly recommend finding a place that is different from this one, because this is literally right next to this event, which means it'll make the player think, oh yes, this event is going to be next. When in reality, this is like the symbol of the house. It's king of the hill. This is like a mountain. Imagine it being extremely big. The carpenter. Somebody's gotta save the carpenter. But anyway, we gotta make these events functional. We're gonna start off with the bounty system. Now the bounty system, the way it's gonna work is basically the bounties are only gonna be available during the event. Now, yes, you could make bounties available forever, but it's not gonna be as special, and you can make the bounties worth more. So the way this is gonna work is there's gonna be 2 bounties. There's going to be your bounty stat, and then there's going to be the enemy bounty stat. The enemy bounty is the reward you're going to get when you kill the enemy, but your bounty is the other stat. So for this bounty system, we're going to go to event actions and player kill. And on this, we're going to do conditional, and we're going to have to see if the event is running. So for a global stat requirement, which we'll actually set that later. And if it is running, then on a player kill, it's going to be the player stat bounty, which is going to be the personal bounty. Every single person in the house is going to have a bounty increment, and it's going to be a random number, %random.end/. Now this bounty is an event, not permanent, so we need to make it valuable. So we're going to do 20 and 40. correction, 41 because of housing being weird. Oh yeah, you kill somebody and the bounty increases by a certain amount. Well, that's all that happens. All it is the stats. So inside of here, we're going to make a condition, which we'll add this later. It's going to be just if the event is currently going on, which we'll have to make another event timer for this. If it is, then we're going to trigger a function, because we can't put a conditional inside of a conditional, and we're going to need a conditional. So this function is going to be bounty event player kill. So for this, we're going to make the personal regular player stat bounty increment by a random number. This is an event, so it should be worth more, so I'm going to do %random.end/20 and 41. Then we're going to add a conditional, since it's a function and nested conditionals will never exist. For the global stat requirement, we're going to make a enemy bounty. Enemy bounty is greater than or equal to 1. We're going to change the gold stat by enemy bounty. And then we're going to display an action bar, because we use the action bar for the plus whatever gold. We're going to do and 6 plus %stat.global/victim bounty %gold. I'm going to specify bounty collected so the player knows, yeah, it was because of a bounty. And I'm going to change the global stat victim bounty to 0, because we just collected basically the pool of money. And we're going to play a sound bat death, which actually fits it perfectly since it's a death and it's a player kill. So yeah, that is the bounty event player kill. Added an icon. But now we need to do another one. Bounty event player death. I'm going to do a pumpkin icon since it simulates death. And guess what? We're going to need a conditional, and we can't nest conditionals. So if the player stat bounty is more than 1, greater than or equal to 1, we're going to set enemy bounty, which is a global stat. We're going to set it to %stat.player/bounty. Because once the player dies, if their bounty is more than 1, it's going to set the victim bounty pool to the bounty. And then we're going to make sure to reset the player bounty to 0, since they just died and they're not going to have an endless amount of bounty. And since this is an event and needs to be special, I'm going to go ahead and find a good sound effect for this. I think cat hiss is perfect. And a lower 0.8 pitch. So this is absolutely perfect. Now let's go to player. Now let's go to player kill. And you know the if we haven't set up. If so, then it's going to trigger the function bounty event player kill. Now if we go to player death, conditional, the global stat requirement we haven't made because of the timer, we're going to trigger the function player death. So we have the actual event stuff set up. So now we need to go make a function for the last countdown we're going to make. Bounty event countdown. So if you notice it looks different, I switched to a different mod. I switched to my instance that has Essentials, Housing Editor, HTSL, Patcher, literally all the housing mods I need. But anyway, here's what I did. I imported it using the Housing Editor, my bounty event countdown, and edited it. First off, what I did was add a bounty event is equal to 2. I'll talk about that in a minute. If so, then it's going to bounty timer second, decrement 1. And then if bounty timer HR is less than or equal to 0, bounty timer mints less than or equal to 0, sec less than or equal to 0. If so, it's going to set bounty event to 0, bounty timer second set to 1 so it doesn't repeat this, and if say event's over. And then more, bounty timer HR is greater than or equal to 1, bounty timer min is less than or equal to 0, bounty timer second less than or equal to 0. Nothing special about this, it's just the same countdowns you would see previously. And same for the last conditional, it's literally like the exact same thing as the countdowns we've been doing. But anyway, that's the countdown. What I also edited was the start event. Basically, when the auto event is equal to 1, which is the bounty event, it's going to bounty event min set 5, that because it's going to last 5 minutes, and bounty event set 2. That way it'll start the countdown, and it'll say bounty event starting, which is what we made earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the broadcast that we made earlier, event broadcast, and first what I'm going to do to the first message, I'm just going to add an extra and R. This is due to the fact that Patcher only did one of the chat messages, and same for this one. This is due to like Patcher or some other housing quality of life mods that kind of, when it's the same exact message, it puts like parentheses 2, 3, 4. But if you add an and R, it considers it a completely different message. So it can make it look better on all computers. And paste. And paste again, but this time remove the and R to make both messages different. And then I added a 5-minute countdown starts now, and the event, and then the global stats. So now I'm going to go to the other event and add the exact same sort of chat messages. I went ahead and added some icons like for start event, a green, rebirth, a red stone block, event broadcast, a book and quill. Since you're broadcasting a message and a message you make in a book and quill, you don't need to add an icon to all of them, but it just helps you easily navigate the ones you're going to access a lot. So we made the bounty event. It works flawlessly, which we'll be testing even more later in the video. But how are we going to make this? Okay, due to housing limitations, we're just going to make it so the first person who gets up there wins the event, gets the gold, everybody else loses. And if they're in this mountain region, which means they're actually trying the event, they're going to get a compensation prize. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make the mountain region and then work on the event. And for the remainder of this video, I am going to be using Housing Editor and everything related to that, including this Pro Tools GUI. This actually makes it a lot easier to visualize where you're at. As you can see, the mountain region is created. You want to make sure every little bit is included. I put one block outward from the whole entire mountain. There ain't no cheating on here. And to make sure if some player somehow in the world finds their way up here, they can't get to the finish line. So I'm going to go ahead and add some barriers. They can't get into one block gap, so I don't need to put in the bottom. Now if I go to start event, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to make sure that bounty event, like it's set being to 2, I'm going to set a stat called mountain climb set to 2, which means it's active. And when the player enters the new region we created, which is mountain, if mountain climb is equal to 2, then do nothing, who cares? But if it isn't, that's when we care. I'm going to teleport player to house spawn, which actually house spawn is literally like right in front of the region, which will need to be changed later. Item break, mountain climb, only 30 seconds till it starts. And the way join event is literally going to work is it's just going to teleport the player up. That way, in case they're all the way at the rebirth station, they don't have to walk all the way up here. So yeah, let's walk through this. It's going to send chat messages and mountain climb set to 2. And now that the event is on go, then the player runs. So another thing, so like I said, we need to add a join event, which the join event is literally going to be right here. I put a little fun chat message in. Okay, so the event is started, and the event countdown is still actually going. So then the player climbs all the way up here. Let me just fly, I'm going to pretend I did it, and then they land on the gold block. So that's what we need to do. We need to go ahead and make this whole entire area right here the winning spot. So if we go to systems, regions, mountain win, and then if mountain climb is equal to 2, so I'm going to set mountain climb to 0, and I'm going to teleport this player to house spawn. And when you win the event, you're going to get 150 gold. Gold increment 150. And my challenge for you, my genuine challenge, is using the knowledge you've got so far, make this a dynamic stat. Basically, instead of 150, it's a dynamic stat. You set the stat in the default player stats function where when they join, they only get the stuff once. And then go to an upgrade and make it upgradable. Like, for example, times 2 or times 1, or if you want even more of a challenge, make it multiply by a decimal once the player has enough cores. That is my genuine challenge for you, and if you can complete that, it'll show you truly learned something today. So we've done that, but oh well, what if I didn't win? What if I'm one of like the 150 people that didn't win? Guess what? We're going to trigger a function in this if statement. And this function is going to be called player win. Now we can't add a question mark, but it's basically like player win. And what we're going to do is if the player is in the mountain region, within region, mountain, or if somehow they're also a mountain win, like it was a really close call and they were jumping during it. If so, then it's going to be like, oh no, you lost. And C and L, you lost. And I'm going to make sure to mention the compensation prize. I'm going to go to the golden and 6 plus 15 gold. And play sound or pickup. We already set mountain climb to 0, and for this we're also going to teleport to house spawn once they get it. Out they 1, action bar sound, increment gold, and we're going to trigger the function player win, all players. Gold increment 15, and there we go. I think we got ourselves an event. So what I'm going to do is I need to test this out. So to make this easier, it's pretty straightforward. So it's timer HR, timer min, and timer seconds. Commands / start event. Timer min set 0, timer sec set 0 / start event. There we go. And as you can see, I won the event, which says you won, keep it up. Got some gold. But now I can't join back in the event. Not even in that secret tunnel. But once the event starts, guess what? I'm gonna be able to join. Now obviously, if there's literally like one person in the house, it can be okay, well, bounty and this event is running at the same time. Which what we're gonna do to safeguard this, making it so once the other event starts, like once auto event number is equal to 1, it sets bounty event to 2, but it's also gonna set mountain climb set to 0. And for the other one, we're gonna set bounty event set 0. So literally they have 5 minutes for both events. We're almost there. We have still some very important stuff to add, but we are so close to being to the very end, the finale of this house. So stay tuned. And don't give up now. So now we're going to add an action bar. This is something that can be used in a lot of houses. So for this, we're just going to make a function like, I don't know, action bar. Pretty self-explanatory. The name. And then like maybe if player stat action bar, not global, because I mean you want the same exact stat as every single person. Do you really want every single person changing each other's action bar? Or you want to let chaos ensue? Go ahead. Action bar is equal to 0. If so, it's going to set to action bar 1. I guess you got to set the right bar, or the bar right, since it's an action bar. And then if action bar is equal to 1, it's going to do action bar 2. And if action bar is equal to 3, we're going to do action bar 3. Because we're good programmers, we know that everything starts at 0, but the whole world thinks numbers start at 1, so we're just going to start with 1, like in the actual action bar names. Well, we're not actually going to show the name, but still. Now, the 3 that I'm going to be using is stats, playtime, event countdowns. Now, you can use 5, 8, whatever, but I think 3 is just a good number because when scrolling through them, you don't want to press the action bar button or whatever like 20 times. We're going to give the player an item to shuffle through their action bar, and the item that that's going to be is a gas tier. I basically said right-click action bar. That way, when you right-click it, you're going to go to /edit, edit actions, trigger function, and create a function, action bar change, and literally change player stat, action bar, increment 1. If I go to /edit, edit actions, trigger function, action bar change, now we're going to set the automatic execution for the action bar 40. That way you can still see when it's plus 14 gold. It's not going to stay up all the time, but that's just a downside we're going to have to live with. And for the action bar change, instead of just incrementing by 1, we're going to make sure action bar is less than or equal to 2, since it's 0, 1, or 2. Action bar, increment 1. But else, it's going to set action bar, set to 0. I had to remove the beginning thing. Now, right-click it again, action bar 3. Right-click it again, action bar 1. Right-click it again, action bar 2. Right-click it again, action bar 3. Okay, so I made a small mistake in my code if action bar is equal to 2, not 3. There we go. Action bar is 1, 2, 3. 1. I had to update the action bar change to action bar less than 2, because remember, I'm developing this with you. That way you can see exactly how a real housing developer develops a house. And just remember, every single person's human. I'm not like a king. I say that and I'm wearing a king hat, but I swear I'm not. Every single person that plays housing is really the exact same. It just matters, you know, some people have different skills than others. So really don't think you're better than anybody else or worse. Action bar. First it's going to be stats, then it's going to be playtime, then it's going to be event countdowns. If you go to the action bar function, go to 3 or programmer terms 2. We're going to change this action bar to, for this one we're going to do timer min, and optionally you can also add time left on event, and basically just add the seconds and minutes of like the bounty event. But again, it's going to be the 0 to most of the time, and it's very niche, so I'm not going to add it. So we added the 3rd action bar. Now for the 2nd action bar, it's going to be playtime, which we actually don't track playtime. For playtime, we're going to do 20 for the execute, and literally just increase seconds, increment 1 each second. Now for the playtime, I actually never quite got a grip on how to make a playtime. It would have took a lot, so Alex Warrior saved my life because he made a playtime tutorial. So I'm gonna admit, I'll be using it, but the whole point of coding is literally use every person that codes, like for example, website uses APIs that are made by other people. For this, it's a conditional player stat requirement Unix less than if the player stat Unix is less than %date.unix, and talk about that in my placeholders guide. I mean, Unix is literally second since something major, and if it is, I'm gonna change player stat Unix set %date.unix. So this just makes sure the stat Unix is always set to date.unix. It's going to increment seconds by number 1. If seconds is greater than or equal to 60. Basically, if 60 seconds is passed, it's going to set seconds to 0. Seconds set 0. Minutes increment 1. So after 60 seconds, it's going to increment minutes by 1 and seconds to 0. Because that's literally how time works. And if minutes is greater than or equal to 60, it's going to set minutes to 0 and hours add 1. So there we go, we got our playtime. So the way this playtime works is if Unix is less than date.unix, it's going to do that. So there's really no need to actually set it to run every single second. We're going to do 5. And now if we go ahead and set our action bar 2 to playtime. And it works perfectly. 2 minutes and 18 seconds, 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And action bars only update once every so often, and because we're using date.unix for this, it updates every single second it's possible. So we got the second one, the third one, and now we have the first one to do, which is stats. Now for the stats, I'm just going to make it an easy access to %stat.player/rank, rebirth, %stat.player/rabe, player/core. Added little lines in between it so it tells the rank, rebirth, core. And then last but not least, we're going to do and6, gold, and R. And you can edit these 4 different stats to literally any stats you want that you deem very important, don't have room for on the scoreboard, or whatever, because this is the first action bar that's always going to be showing for people until they click this. But there's a lot more stats in the house, right? So the way we're going to solve this is by adding a stat dude. So yeah, we'll be adding the stat dude in part 3 of the video, the final part, I promise. Anyways, remember to subscribe and like the video so you get notified when it comes out. And I'll see you in the next one. House on.